Ladies and gentlemen, to Carmine's Arena, a cultural gourmet of information, if you will, a feast for your mind and soul. And now, without further delay, the man, the myth, the maestro, Carmine Arena.
Greetings and welcome once again to Carmine's Arena, site of contest and conflict, venue for and of resolution. Resolution in terms of focus, remedy, and commitment, both yours and mine, to the preservation, the propagation, and indeed the celebration of Western civilization. In my last episode, I gratefully quoted the contemporary African-American thinker, Thomas Sowell. This apt quote bears repetition. He said it takes considerable knowledge just to realize the extent of one's own ignorance, unquote. You will find that the ignorance of the learned, those schooled and credentialed, is nowadays to be found in the vast expanse of academia and of the media. They both should heed Oscar Wilde's admonition that the well-bred contradict other people, the wise contradict themselves. Since I'm forever contradicting myself, I feel an immodest confidence in declaring myself wise. Thus, you should listen to me faithfully and learn how it's done. Such be the preservatives of Western civilization, of which I am totally enamored. Now, when one just steals from a lone source, one is in danger of being charged with plagiarism. But if one does as I do and steals from many sources, you are sure to be praised for diligent research. Even the genius, again Oscar Wilde, admitted that of course I plagiarize. It is the privilege of the appreciative man. Molière, the great French playwright, said of plagiarism, "I recover my property wherever I find it." Pablo Picasso advised that to copy others is necessary, but to copy oneself is pathetic. Not being of the rank of Wilde, Molière, and Picasso, I turn to research. And so in this episode of Carmine's Arena, which I entitle Life's Chores, let us see how many of my eager research tentacles, as it were, glom on to facts whilst presumably surrendering fallacies to the aforementioned ignorance of the learned. For in order to achieve a fairly well-adjusted life at all, we must be made ready to grapple with the ongoing chapters, verses, and phases of our mortal span. As each chronological period from cradle to the grave requires that we master a timely skill, or said chronology is seriously interrupted, and maladjustment overtakes us. In short, when we don't master life's assigned task, the task as a trial left untried shall invite tribulation. There ain't no escaping this prediction. The key is to unlock the understanding that life is a continuum of one damn thing after another. Without this complete understanding, one ends by living in denial, or similarly, on mind-altering drugs. Though consciously forgotten, each one of our mom's contractions when laboriously giving birth to us preconsciously began there and then to prepare and teach us that life was going to be a bumpy ride. Nonetheless, evicted from the Eden of the womb, we soon after survive to be cradled in mother's arms, feeling her warm, comforting breath and that first of many maternal kisses that teach us love. Yes, you guys out there, it was a woman who first taught you the essence of love. Some learn while all too many continue to seek it with smug, seamy satisfaction. A substitute for the real thing. A mirage, in fact, whereat love is just another four-letter word emptied of meaning the more it is uttered. Among life's chores, which commence in infancy and early childhood, prescribe that we well learn to creep, crawl, and walk. Walk before we ever can run. Learning to take solid foods, sitting upright, and ultimately learning good table manners. My own experience, unfortunately, is that doting parents set free their offspring to dine like dinosaurs whose gulping survives extinction to live on in cyberpunk brats. Now, after learning to swallow solid foods, the very next task is being potty trained. This is a serious and vital achievement, for failing this timely training forestalls socializing and its singular significance. Next in the developmental tasks of infancy and early childhood is the learning of sex differences and sexual modesty, all seemingly lost, for example, at spring break, where funky dorm life culminates on foreign beaches, where the paroxysm of parental failure to engage in parenting is forfeited to the many later unspoken regrets, when spoken at all, are to be heard on Dr. Phil or the likes of Maury Povich. The regret of sexually transmitted diseases, unwanted pregnancies, the immodest surrender of virginity, both male and female, to the stupidity, and to stud farm antics. The surrender to interrupted studies paid by doting dupes for tuition. Tuition for the supposed development of intellection, despite cutesy-wootsy campus camp. I ask, is there no limit to kinky playfulness when even at the dreadful cost of humor's demise, a demise replaced by empty laughter? Ironically, the very next developmental chore in early childhood is the forming of conceptual thought and the learning of language skilled enough to describe social and physical reality. And as we depart from childhood, getting ready to learn to read, all this posed against the future spring break phenomenon must give us pause to wipe clean the despair and our shared dilemma. That is to say, shared by the wise among us who have wisdom, rather than the wise guy who lives in his or her very own prison, a life sentence, in fact. Next in life's chores come the yet-to-be mastered tasks of middle childhood, namely, learning physical skills necessary for ordinary games, building wholesome attitudes towards oneself as a growing organism, learning to get along with age mates, learning an appropriate masculine or feminine social role, developing fundamental skills in reading, writing, and calculating, developing conscience, morality, and a scale of values achieving personal independence, developing proper attitudes towards social groups and institutions, achieving, in short, a sense of occasion. Here now we arrive at the developmental tasks of adolescence, achieving a masculine or feminine social role, accepting one's physique and using the body effectively, achieving emotional independence of parents and other adults, and of course, preparing for an economic, wage-producing career, acquiring a set of values and an ethical system as a guide to behavior, developing a creative ideology free from popular idolatry. When we arrive at adulthood, if we ever get there, our next task is selecting a mate, learning to live with a marriage partner. For the less we have come to need marriage, the more we expect of it. All things being equal, our next chore is starting a family, rearing children, managing a home, taking on civic responsibility, finding a congenial social group. These trials, left unmet, result in our devolving culture, where tasks and chores are considered an imposition. In middle age, the tasks keep coming. Achieving adult civic and social responsibility, establishing and maintaining an economic standard of living, and most importantly, assisting one's teenagers to become responsible and happy adults. Developing leisure time activities, relating oneself to one's spouse as a person in possession of one's own personhood. Accepting and adjusting to the physiologic changes of middle age, and yes, adjusting to aging parents. Finally, in later maturity, when one's lazy behind frequently falls asleep and begins to snore, one must adjust to decreasing physical strength and health, adjusting to retirement and reduced income, adjusting to the death of loved ones, particularly one's spouse, establishing an explicit affiliation with one's age group, establishing satisfactory physical living arrangements as you approach transition to the Great Divide. There now, you have the chores necessary for even a so-so existence, free of unweathered error and the deafening thunder of blunder. As I grow old in our devolving, unrealistic cultural milieu, I understand life less and less. And yet, thanks to my no-nonsense upbringing, I've learned and am still learning to live life more and more. Consequently, this classic unbroken chain of earlier enumerated chores must be mastered from the moment we are born. Thereafter, when the chores are fulfilled with mastery and skill, you are loosened from the chain and can express a genuine will distilled of impurities and chilled swill. For to achieve a responsible freedom to explore your individuality is the bliss life offers to those who fully understand life's ever impending trials and meets them gallantly. For the knowledge of self and selfhood is a divine mandate that predates an initial selfish ego, which generally wears a tight-fitting mask. A theatrical prop which hides the untried, those others who have been taught to endure for that one moment more, of course, live with bare-face conviction. The conviction, say, of creative impulses, which forever seek after perfection, no matter how difficult perfection's attainment. God loves such of those motivated creatures, and those whom God loves grow younger. Those, on the other hand, who tire of life's chores, grow old. So old that no longer does their mirror remind them who it is they are behind that well-worn, lovelorn mask. A prop they are all too feckless to remove, for it takes vitality to know and expose your identity. That is, your tired and true, or I should say, your tried, untired, and true identity, which, in the end, draws its last breath proudly. Thus, life's chores require parents who understand fully the jeopardy and perils attendant upon catering to their offspring unconditionally, giving children thereby a false notion of the real world, a world not predisposed to think you're anything special just because you live and breathe and crave. Multiple studies abound which establish the consequences of bringing up free-range brats. Ironically, the latter reserve their greatest contempt for their incompetent, all-loving caretakers, while seeking and receiving advice from equally entitlement-greedy peers. Coddle creatures, brought up to be rude, demanding, and self-centered, and is to be found. Yes, it is to be found that the self-centered actually lack a center. Parents themselves must resist the falsehood that giving your children things equates to love. Oftentimes, parents have little time for parenting and end up showering the brat in waiting with gifts, unearned tributes, guilt-sponsored. These unfortunate children never ever entirely make it in the workplace, having never learned to play nice. All too many end up back home, having learned to progress from brat, yes, from brat to parasite. Parasites purporting to be positively helpful, yet, in truth, standing by to capture property and bank accounts of aging parents, deceived by their brat's pseudo-concern, hidden behind that ill-worn, tight-fitting mask. Elder abuse and unjust enrichment from that vulgar sort shall accrue well-earned misery in life and damnation in death. For hell is where where in life they live. Heaven for this sad lot is ever seen as belonging to others. It has been noted and studied that siblings eventually learn that their rivalry must be tamed. Masks won't work. The authentic black sheep, however, that is to be found, discovered, or should I say detected, in the only child household, where he or she sets one parent against the other when they are poisonous, never quite able to love or honor both simultaneously, and after much trial and error, chooses the weakest and most deluded and easily snooked of either of these lone children, also routinely betray. These lone children betray not only one of their parents or both, they betray their marital mates in more ways than can be counted. Many, as a result, ever needy and dependent, remarry, which serves as an example of hope's triumph over experience. Small wonder that Oscar Wilde, who rarely, if ever, misjudged our species, declared that divorces are made in heaven. I personally have written and spoken elsewhere about the wisdom in making marriage much, much harder to enter into, until certain verifiable goals and aims have been completely met. It is divorce which should be simplified and achievable effortlessly. I trust that if you have listened carefully, you understand cerebrally that life's trials must be met as they pop up, and that you also understand emotionally, and indeed spiritually, that when and if said trials remain unmet by evasion and or self-deception, you will have determined to undermine your existence to date. If enough engage in this great escape, what will be ultimately undermined is our culture as well, a culture presently in dystopia, depraved and shameless, having degenerated into double talk and double think unto bubble burst. Awake and shake yourselves up. Find the strength to remove and lose the mask. Unmeasured masquerading is best left to monkeys. Yet, even monkeys fall out of trees, you know, when too fired up to observe balance and gravity. Hence, don't monkey around. Do your developmental chores and do them thoroughly. Saving yourself is to save your culture, society, and Western civilization. Now, those of you viewers who visit Carmine's Arena, even occasionally, well know that I close each episode with an appeal and the admonition to keep the faith. Just why do I do that? Because we live without a belief system. To live without it is to cut oneself off from the magic, mystery, and miracle of our merging with who it is we are, from where we have emerged and what is and must be our mission apart from our mischief. To be secular is to be moonstruck on the fantasy that we know it all, suffering from a recurring narcosis generated by snarky narcissism. These clueless, progressive know-it-alls fail to understand failure itself, and error's insistence that their greatest error is to unhinge themselves from an immutable moral code, opening the door wide to relativism and indulgent permissiveness. And so, I'll continue my customary admonition. With love and regard for all who hear me out. And I do trust and I do hope earnestly that you recognize the chores that you have gained victory over. All those chores starting from childhood, early childhood, and developing onward and upward, presumably, to adolescence, middle age, and old age, that you understand that to the very end, to greet the end proudly and gallantly, you must have had experience in developmental tasks won and merited. Thus again, my admonition to all of you. When I say to you earnestly and deeply felt, this close is not merely window dressing. All of you out there, my listeners, my audience, keep the faith.
If you have any comments or other remarks, and that I perhaps could even read on some of these broadcasts, please do not hesitate to write to me, Carmine Arena, P.O. Box 1029, Larchmont, New York 10538.